I've really been pushing Pete to get on this call is because of the stuff that Wally was just talking about. A lot of times, and Tom referred to it, even some of these younger coaches, that what Pete did, something, and what you guys do every day is something that should be like a model, that should be a pathway for young coaches for success, because of the fact that you and anybody that's coached, longer than 25 understands that, we've made mistakes and done the right things and the wrong things. And, so Pete took a program actually from nothing, Coach University, and with putting together an organization from scratch. And then, and Pete, you could chime in, because I don't want to speak for you, but there was never an expectation like, okay, we're going to win our championship in 2 years. It was always about building the program, building character, building your relationships, and then the success of the program would come from that. So, I mean, and that's really one of the reasons I thought Pete would be so valuable to this group, is because of not only his experience as a father and as a coach, as an educator, as a program developer and architect, but really just from a perspective of, giving younger coaches better pathways for success, and take it, right, for them to take that information and use it properly, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel and making the same mistakes and faltering. So, Pete, I don't know, you could maybe tell, maybe speak a little bit about, really quickly, the journey of the post-university story, and something we talk about all the time about, not putting one thing ahead of the other as far as, building your teams.
Yeah, well, I mean, at Post, so the way that happened was in 2015. I was still working at the Gunnery School, which is a prep school in Western Connecticut, and I also worked in admissions there. You always wear a couple of hats when you work in prep school. But I basically sat down with the president of the university, and they're, colleges, universities create programs because they're trying to build enrollment, right? That's a big reason. So, plus in this case, the president at that point was a guy that really enjoyed ice hockey. So I sat with him in that April, and he said, he offered me the job, and he said, so the next question is, can we have a team by September? So I'm thinking, that's 4 months. So I want the job. So of course my answer is yes, absolutely. So in that 4-month period, I recruited a team, built a schedule, everything, right? Everything you imagine, uniforms, buses, whatever's involved with that. And I only bring that up because, and to allude to what Mike's talking about, everything I've ever coached at has been to build a program. Because to me, a team and a program are two different things. A team is part of a program, but the program itself is the culture. And you've created an actual program when you can step away, and then that program, that team continues to succeed. Then you've really created something. So I've been fortunate to have been able to do that. And well, actually, to one of your points there, you mentioned like, how do guys, as we get older, and that, how do we stay more relevant, right? I think one of the cruelties of life is, right, when you get to a certain age, you've accomplished a lot, and because you've accomplished a lot, you no longer have that ego, right? Ego is not an issue with you anymore because you have confidence. I think that's something that I see lacking in a lot of the younger coaches, the 30-some-year-old coaches. They're all kind of trying to prove themselves. So, that saying, never let them see you sweat, right? I think that's one of the reasons that they potentially don't engage, at least very visually, unless maybe it's on the side with a phone call or something like that. People who have had the experience we have, because they want to show that they can do it, right? I mean, to me, like, one of the most important things in life I've learned is knowing what you don't know versus what you do know. Like, it's okay to not know. What's not okay is to not know and not try to get better at it. So I think that's part of it. I think there's an ego thing related to that as you get older, I don't know about you guys, but as far as I'm concerned, it's no big deal. Like, I know what I know, and I'm confident with it, and If somebody wants me to share the information, I'm happy to. If they don't, like that's okay too, but I don't need them to. Whereas I feel like the younger coaches, there's a need there as far as the ego piece goes. I don't know. I don't know what you guys think.
I think you're bang on with that. It, I've done a little reading on that. Ego is the enemy, and actually, I'm really glad you brought up that point on ego, because we all strive for recognition and approval, and the greatest need in human nature is the need to be appreciated. And whether it's a player on a team you coach, or a coworker, or even a manager or an employee, they both need appreciation. And I think that's sort of something we have to remind ourselves of. But when we're young, we're seeking it, approval, recognition, and the ego is the enemy. It's the thing that pulls you down. So for the audience, I'm just throwing out Eckhart Tolle's name and a book called The Power of Now. It's worth Googling. And he talks about the importance of the moment and not worrying about the past. You can't control that. Not worrying about the future, but staying in the moment. And the ego is really what takes you out of the moment. Doesn't matter if you're an athletic performance and you're on the field, made a bad play, your ego is affected, you don't feel good about yourself, and you're not going to perform well. I read that book, recovering from a heart attack, in 2007, and I just tied it in with sports psychology.
What's the name of that author again? I'm sorry.
Eckhart, E-C-H-E-R-T. E-C-K-E-H-E-R-T. The Power of Now is one of his many books. Tolle, T-O-L-L-E. And if you Google it on YouTube, he has 5-minute segments that are hilarious, but bang on. He talks about tennis and being in the moment and the beauty of sport in terms of just watching it and see those things happen when they happen. So it's just something that relates to this. And Pete, when you took over that team, how old were you? What was your coaching experience?
For post university, you mean?
Yeah, that particular job that you took over.
So that particular job was in 2015. So at that point, I was 59 years old. I had coached prep school for 11 years, BCHA club hockey for 7 years, started a midget program with 7 kids, 2 of which were skateboarders, more than they were hockey players. So I had all that prior experience. And they were, the midget team was a team that was brand new. Same thing. I built that and created that. When I joined the prep school team, it was a team that had been 2-30 the year before. Was really a great bunch of guys. I'm sure you guys have experienced this too, where just kind of the tea leaves all fall together, so to speak, and you end up with just this great bond. And like we were together as a staff for 11 years, which in prep school is pretty much unheard of. Guys are always kind of moving around, and like we were fortunate. I mean, we did everything from win championships to NHL draft picks to Hobie Baker finalists, and so I think all that kind of stuff really prepared me to know what I was getting into when I started the post university job. Was, again in April, and you guys know, like when you're trying to put a team together, April to put together a team for that fall is not really the best time to go recruiting because there's not a whole lot left available, right? So we had to teach those guys everything. Like literally, we had to teach them that you need to bring music into the locker room to play that before a game or before a practice. Like it was everything. Honestly, it was like raising kids, which I'm fortunate. I got a couple of kids, so I got experience doing that. And that's really what really was the approach that I took, was because that was one of the things with my assistant was his coach, they should know this stuff. I said, you're right, but they don't. So it's our job to teach them everything. And I said, that'll be the fun of it because we get to create absolutely everything. We get to create the culture of the team, what's acceptable, what isn't, the importance of community service, all those things that really make you a better person. And if you become a better person, you become a better teammate, you become a better player, because all of that success is simply a byproduct of all those other things.
How soon, and go back to when you were 20, finished playing, when you began, did it just happen naturally, or how?
Well, I was lucky because I grew up on a farm, a plant nursery. I was in horticulture. My family, we did that for over 40 years. And my dad was a World War II veteran who was in the Battle of the Bulge and all that good stuff. So he was a pretty straight shooter, and he was like just a great role model for me and just a mentor. So by the time I was in my early 20s, I was doing that full time. And to me, that's where it all kind of came together, because once I ran the farm, I use the same approach on the farm as I did with a team, right? I mean, we had 8 to 10 employees, and we were a team, and we had a common goal, and the common goal was we talked about our common goals, and they had interaction of what we'd have our weekly and monthly meetings about where we're going, where they want to go within the nursery, that kind of thing. So it was, for me, it was pretty natural. I think it goes back to my upbringing from my dad, really.
And that's sort of what I was getting at. I think all of our parents brought us up the right way, and we just naturally morphed into walking the talk of the right way. We're dealing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're all pretty much on that same page too, right? Like there were no excuses then, whereas now there's a reason for every failure that a kid has in life, be it in the classroom, be it on the ice, be it on the tennis court. There's a reason for the failure, and the last thing is it's on that kid. We're gonna explore every other possibility as to why we weren't successful. That is not my fault. Instead of starting with that, asking the question, what could you have done different? And I think that's part of society today. So maybe that's why when we mention those kinds of things, right, to younger coaches and that, I think there's some words where they're like, I can't say that. But actually, you can say that if you say it the right way, right?
Do you do coaching certification clinics at all, Peter?
Actually, that's where I had the pleasure of meeting Michael Bonelli. I'm in Connecticut, but I was adopted by New York State, and I said that's okay because that's where my dad was born, actually, in New York. So I've done the coaching clinics for years. I'm still doing some of that stuff. I'm going to do some podcasts. I've been talking to somebody about doing some seminars about like what it takes to coach, what it takes to play in prep school, what it takes to be a good college player. So I'm exploring a bunch of stuff still, like just being retired just means I don't have to do a 5-hour bus ride to St. Michael's in Vermont anymore, which is good.
Well, I'm going to get back to Mike here. Mike, I think you knew in getting Peter to come on. I wonder if you would talk about, Mike, the like I believe that we've got the answer to the problem. You've got all the ideas. We all have the ideas. We do things the right way. How do you get a generation, multiple changing generations, whether they're leaders on associations or young coaches volunteering, to do things the right way for the right reason? And Mike, the mission statement exercise that we're going to do on the 12th with the coaches site and rehearse it on the 7th. And I have a question whether I'm involved in the rehearsal, but to me, that's the switch to get coaches at any age to think about why they coach, to understand the purpose of coaching. This at noon today, I'm scheduled to do the exercise with a young female hockey coach at a university, Michael. She got to the national playoffs and she wants to do the exercise. She was on our Sharks call 3 weeks ago, and she wants to know how to take her team to another level. And I'm changing the approach with her, Mike, like with the coaches site people. And this is the question we ask them, Peter, at every coaching clinic. This is the module on ethical coaching that I deliver at the beginning of every certification clinic that I do. And I've done hundreds over the years. So, Mike, we asked everybody in the audience, which can be parents, players, administrators, what do they want to accomplish this season? What would they like to do better this season? And we work up, build a list, and write them down and sort them into two columns. One is an outcomes column, and the other is a column of values, enjoyment, development that lead to outcomes. So, Mike, we start with the bottom. We put an X through the outcomes, say you can't control that, but how do you accomplish it? Now, I'm changing the approach, Mike, and I need your opinion. And with this college coach who's been in a national championship, I'm going to get her to write down her outcome goals. And then I'm going to ask her, well, how do you accomplish that? And I'll put them in a middle column. And then eventually we'll reverse it. So I'm not sure how the approach goes, but in the end, you have everyone that takes this module write a mission statement based on the value side, the process side, and they put it on a fridge magnet with their team logo. It's no more than 12, 15 words, and it's a reminder to every constituent, every participant of what they're there for, the process that you can control. So I'm just sharing that, Pete, because it's very timely with what we're going to do. And this female coach that she's buying into it, and she's an enthusiastic young coach, and she's one of those coaches that we want to influence. So, Mike, can you talk a bit about the potential of that, and maybe Peter can get the hang of it and try to play with it when he does stuff?
Yeah, so well, Peter, he'll get the invite anyway. So, Pete, what we're doing in a couple of weeks with the coaches site, it's going to go out to their whole, 5,000 member mailing list, and we're going to do a live mission statement workshop with Wally. And one of the pieces of this is that they'll sign up and they'll get all the information prior to them coming on to the Zoom call. Wally perform the mission statement with a number of live people. Wally will probably be like 3 or 4 coaches that we know on that call, and we're building the mission statement to them, and then anybody else that's on the call obviously is just there in the virtual sense. But then, what Wally does, which is pretty unique too, is that not only does he do the workshop, but then you send your answers and the information you've gathered to him, and then he'll provide feedback from that. The cool thing about one of the things that always, I think, catches me off guard is that we as coaches do this with our players all the time. We all have, I think most good coaches at the beginning of the year have a coaching meeting and come up with some type of a, expectation and goal setting and things like that, where they want to be. But what a lot of coaches don't do this is to themselves. They don't give themselves their own mission statement. They don't give themselves an opportunity to say, okay, what can I control, and what can I bring on to my players and the people I work with? What can I do to make this a better experience for them? I think people like you, Pete, do this inherently because this is, like you said, you've done this only because that's your history. You know that I've got to start with, the expectations and goal setting and how I'm going to get to certain outcomes, whether they're controllable or not. And I think this is what's lacking. So and Wally, Pete, knowing that, we've had him in our coaching clinics in New England and New York State, he does this, instinctively. Like this is his, if he's doing a seminar with our coaches, and I think Pete would agree, we don't do enough. And it's changed a little bit with USA Hockey over the last couple of years, but we've done more X's and O's than real, like, how are you teaching and how can you impact, and what are the things that you do as a coach that's going to influence and change the direction of how a player performs, instead of worrying about what kind of power play Post University runs and how does Pete teach that. And I think that's, for the youth hockey coach, it's so much more important to understand this mission from a perspective of how do we make better people and better, create better families and create a better environment to keep our kids in the game and create a better experience for everyone, including myself as the coach. And I think that's what hopefully we'll be able to start ticking away with this mission statement. So I think for you to have for all intents and purposes, Wally, right, a very successful coach in her field, coming back and saying, well, how do I even make this success better? How do I improve what I'm doing more than just maybe the wins? But maybe the end of that becomes more of a reality if I can build this better base off of knowing, how to approach these things with my kids. So I think I personally think it's great. And I think the fact that which is always very impressive to me, is watching the way you work and how you can pivot and evolve and change direction and go with the your gut feeling about where you need to go with some of the things, as opposed to a 19-year-old kid running a midget team, or a 26-year-old player running a midget team and still coaching the way maybe they were coached when they were a young kid, and not changing and pivoting and evolving and changing. So and I say the same thing about Tom. I mean, the way Tom uses video and incorporates video and sharing in his platform, you can't get a lot of young, iPad geniuses to do that. So it's really inspiring for me when I'm speaking to younger coaches to be able to use people like you as examples of mentors and program developers that are truly always evolving. And I think the mission statement workshop is one of those pieces for sure.
I'm really thankful that the coaches site's going to take it on. Peter, 40 years ago with Hockey Canada, I was doing work for them, primarily because a good friend of mine that I played with was coaching the national team. And it wasn't a part of Hockey Canada at the time. It was the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association. And we had produced great X and O videos, two of them. One called Goals 1, which was offensive hockey. Second one was Goals 2, defensive hockey. Mike, it was X's and O's. It was the best thing out in the time. And it's still, in keeping with today's game. And we got a request from the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association because insurance rates were going up. Hitting from behind, aggression in the game, and they asked us to do a Goal 3 video. It was related to checking and respect in sport. And I was asked to put the video together and create 3 chapters. And the first chapter, which I borrowed from a coach who developed it at the University of Alberta, and it was applied to all their university teams over many years. And he's the John Wooden of Canada, Claire Drake, who has won. Talk about X's and O's, Mike. In 1 year, he had to replace football coach. He was assisting the football coach. He had won multiple national hockey championships. And the same year, he had to replace the football coach who was sick. He won both national championships in both sports. And the essence of what he did was what we're talking about, his approach. He had the X's and O's down, the right amount, right time, right way. But he also had the emotional intelligence of how to communicate and deal with people, which I believe is what successful coaches have better than others. And successful leaders. This isn't just a sports thing. It's a business thing. So anyway, like what happened, the national team folded because the NHL began to expand. And so the CHA took over Hockey Canada. And at the time of the writing of that module, to be put into the coaching clinics, like a mandatory thing, my vision was the first time coach is going to get it. And he's going to have to write a mission statement, understanding why he's coaching. He's going to have to learn to walk the talk. At every level of clinic you take the same module, but you take it to another level and you revise it to the high performance level like we've talked about, Mike, today. And that's the first time I've thought of reversing it. You want to win a championship. That's what you're there for. But if that's all you worry about and your ego is going to be affected, your emotions are going to be affected, that'll affect the players, and you're doomed. Well, it slipped through the cracks, Pete. It never happened. And the powers to be have the power to implement it, but they didn't. Nothing to their fault. It was just, that's what organizations do. They change leadership, companies change, new people come in. They just don't have the feel that we have for the needs of the sport in terms of how it can influence society for the better. So I'm really optimistic about it, Peter. I think it's automatic for you and Tom and myself. Our success and Tom's success, numbers of national championships, provincial championships, city championships in multiple sports speak to the way we coached, because we coached the right way. And it wasn't focusing on X's and O's. It was knowing how to teach and develop those skills, but knowing how to get them to participate and give their best effort all the time, be motivated. So anyway, I'm really glad we got to talk about it. Peter, what do you think of the idea of a module like that? And it's one thing for you to do clinics for Michael with a number of associations. Politically, I've been involved with Hockey Canada, and they can control every association in the country. And if that module became a part of what we're talking about, we could change the sporting world through hockey. I think it would make a tremendous difference because that generation of players that becomes coaches would recruit people to serve on their association executives. Over time, you would have people the right mindset involved. So that's my vision for it. I'm going to go down fighting and keep it going. And thank goodness, Michael. I live from week to week. Like when I got the word from this girl, she wanted to do the exercise. Okay, I got to live that long. Now I got the September 12th. Okay, I got to live that long. And actually, that's what I do. I get excited about these opportunities, and the Thursday calls keep me alive because I just play with them after, edit them, share them, send them out, and Peter from a emotional intelligence point of view and an X and O point of view. I think the presentation by Gardner McDougall, I would say it's 90% emotional intelligence, Michael.
Yeah.
He knew the X's and O's, but the way he was able to communicate to those athletes at that young age was remarkable. So it all comes together, and hopefully we can keep getting the word out. And I'm looking to the coaches' site to take this on and maybe influence the game for the better in an even bigger way than we can imagine. So
yeah, well, two things. I think that's, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The coaches site now has become like really a great resource and a reach, and I think we can implement some things that are really going to help the coaching community and community itself, honestly, especially if we can find the right people to listen and go through the exercise. And just so you know, we've scheduled another one for June of 2023.